या हाज़रीन मजलिस अस्सलामु अलैकुम व रहमतुल्लाहि व बरकातुहू. So today inshallah is our 9th lecture in the series that we have titled The Pursuit and Practice of Ihsan. And we have covered actually a lot of ground as I was going through everything. It turns out that we did talk about a lot of things and hopefully some of them have stuck. So today inshallah will be our last lecture in this series, and tomorrow obviously is the day of Ashura. So before we begin, can we have a salawat, please? So if you could just support me a little bit. I know it's hard. I know we're sitting outside, and just from my end, it's not you, it's me. It's really hard to talk when everybody is looking somewhere else. Okay, so let's just try to just for a little while, because today actually there's a lot of ground to cover, and inshallah with your support, we can get there. So before we go any further, there was a question that came up yesterday about, remember we talked about how having good intentions about people is the foundation and principle of strong relationships, right? And so the question that came up was that, is that always true? Because what if somebody keeps saying, I have good intentions, and they keep doing things which are not in line with what appears to be good intentions, right? So obviously I didn't have time to engage with this person to really understand, but one of the things is that listen to the context in which that was shared, okay? So we said that there was a difference between our relationships with the general population and our close relationships, remember? And the idea was that we cannot we cannot put the same energy and effort into every relationship that we have as we do into our close relationships. So what I was trying to say was that, when we go to the mosque, when we engage with just people that we know, that we like, and they do something, we don't have time to sit and have a discussion about everything that everyone does, right? Otherwise, that's all we would be doing. If every time we went out, somebody said something to upset us and we wasn't in the habit of letting it go, literally it would take up all our energy, right? So the point was that when you're having general discussions, when you're having general conversations, when you are out in public, it is a really good idea to have this attitude of being easygoing, of letting things slide, of not letting everything that somebody does upset you, okay? Now, reality is, and we try to make these things as practical and real as possible. Reality is that when people matter a lot, and today really that's all we're going to be talking about, when people are close to us, they will be doing things that upset us. And since we are in a normal, ongoing, everyday relationship with them, we do need to deal with issues. I am not saying please ignore everything, wake up, have this intention, and we are real human beings and we need to have real relationships, right? So people who are close to us, who matter, who are, is a close friend or a family member and they've upset us, or it's a pattern of behavior, we do need to address it. And that's what we were talking about, that we address it, but at the right time. We address it, but having the principle of repelling evil with good. In other words, responding and not reacting. Not reacting in the moment, but thinking about what we want to say, thinking about why this really matters, and then having that conversation. Okay, so salawat. So just to do a really, and by the way, our topic for today is Ihsan towards parents and the challenges of multi-generational relationships. The challenges of multi-generational relationships and the blessings, of course. Okay, so everything that we've been talking about till now will apply today. Everything. Okay, so let's just take a really brief summary of like a one-liner of things that we've been talking about. We started by talking about that we need to have good role models, we need to learn from them, right? We talked about what is Ihsan. Ihsan is goodness, Ihsan is piety, Ihsan is excellence, Ihsan is, and then the Quran gives us certain qualifications and definitions of what is ihsan. Can we please have another salawat? We started by saying that the reward of acting with ihsan is ihsan, right? That Allah gives us more than we bargain for, in the sense when we do something, He gives us a lot back. And part of that is to remind ourselves that in asantum le anfusikum. We have been repeating this verse every single day. What does this mean? That when we do good, we do it for ourselves. And throughout the lectures, we've been talking about how it's not only that I feel good, but it is my entire physiology. My body works better, my heart works better, my brain works better when I'm doing the right thing. And the point of that conversation was that to really understand how merciful is our Lord, that to really understand that we are not being asked to do any favors to anyone. When we are on this path of ihsan, the primary and first beneficiaries is ourselves. Why do we need to remind ourselves again today? Because the conversation that we are about to have is going to be challenging for some of us to hear. Okay? We also talked about our obligations when we receive ihsan. When somebody does good to us, we have very clear ideologies of what we have to do in response. We have to, at the minimum, thank them, at the minimum, spread good words about them. And if we can, we need to pray that we have the opportunity and ability to help them if they are ever in need. And obviously, we pay it forward, right? Allah tells us, do good to others as Allah has done good to you. So in other words, anything that we receive, whether it is ability, whether it is financial assistance, whatever it is, we need to pay it forward as we go. Okay? And then we talked about ihsan in challenging relationships, and the basic idea, the blueprint of that was what? Repel evil with good. In modern language, in psychology, what that means is respond and don't react. If somebody says something to us, and we started the conversation by saying, yes, this is hard. Why is it hard? Because when someone attacks us, when someone tells us something, our body is designed to fight. Why? Because if we didn't do that, we would not be alive, right? So having said that, we need to recognize that the person in front of us is not an enemy. We are not being attacked. It's not a tiger. It's actually our spouse, our parent, our sibling, our child, okay? And when we remind ourselves, when we take a pause, when we breathe, when we get in touch with the human values that Allah has given us, what are some things in our toolbox? We have self-awareness, we have an imagination, we have willpower, we have a conscience. All of these things help us take a pause and then do the right action. Okay, we spent like almost, I think, 2 lectures just on this one idea. Then we talked about what are the keys of doing ihsan. What does Quran tell us? Just one verse, 134 in Surah Al Imran, that those who are the Mohsineen, and Allah loves the Mohsineen, He reminds us, what do? They spend. They spend when they have, they spend when they are in hardship themselves. And this obviously goes way beyond just money. Secondly, they restrain their anger, and we really spent a lot of time talking about what that meant. And thirdly, they have this attitude of forgiveness. So they have both. They forgive when something happens to them, and then they have this general idea that they don't get upset at everything. Okay? So with that kind of background, we are now going to talk about the challenges of intergenerational relationships, right? So what we will be talking about is how Allah, again, has designed what, if we follow what the guidance that has come to us through scripture, through hadith, it will be easier. It will be much easier if we do what is recommended, okay? Secondly, reminding ourselves in an intergenerational family, what do I mean by intergenerational family? Parents, children, right? And of course, spouses, in-laws, all of that. In an intergenerational family, what are the roles of everyone, including God? Remember, one very important thing we talked about, one of the keys, principles for well-being in life is, remember what is your business, remember what is the other person's business, remember what is God's business. So today we will, inshallah, go more into depth in that. And then we will become more real and say what happens when things are not ideal. How do you deal with the situation? And again, this is a very, it's really given me a lot of sleepless nights, this one conversation, because we do need to talk about abusive parents. And we do need to talk. So I know Sayyid Jafri did a very good job with younger children, right? When children are still in your care, and when parents are not, because they're still living at home, you still have the ability to make amends. What if now you are grown up, you have your own families, and parents are still quite challenging? Okay, so how do we deal with that situation? And so I really need everyone's focus, and we need to go quite fast. But the way I'm doing this is slightly different from every day. So when I'm talking to anyone, we all know I'm first talking to myself, right? I'm a mother, I'm a child, I'm a sister, and inshallah soon about to be a mother-in-law, okay? So I'm definitely in the same boat as everyone else. However, the way I'm going to be addressing you today is you. I never do that, by the way. If you notice, I always say we, right? Because I'm very much speaking first to myself. The reason why I'm doing that is because I'm first going to be speaking to the parents, because that's how the relationship starts, right? When a child is born, they're completely helpless. So the relationship starts with the parents. I will first speak to the parents, and then I will speak to the children, and then we'll speak to everyone. But of course, when we are speaking to anyone, we know that everyone needs to listen, right? Because there are lessons in it for all of us. So let's have a salawat. So let's paint a picture of an ideal family which lives according to guidance of Islam. So the first thing is that the child is born. Before the child is even born, you get pregnant. Okay, so let's start with the pregnancy. Now, during the pregnancy, Allah is doing all sorts of things under the radar which we don't know. What is He doing? He is putting love for this child inside us. We will need a lot of that because we know parenting is extremely challenging, right? So before the child is even born, we form an attachment to this child. We form an attachment, we have dreams for the child, we're already attached. Now, when the child is born, Allah tells us something, and this is in Hadith, it's not in the Quran, but all of us know it, so I'm just going to refer to it. According to tradition and according to Hadith, the job of a parent, the contract that you have as a parent is a very important one, right? That contract is time limited. It is not till your child dies or you, right? It is a contract, who knows for how long? 21 years. That is your job, okay? So what is our role? What is the parent's role in those 21 years? Very, very clear, extremely in line with the psychology of well-being. So in the first 7 years, the parent is only supposed to follow the instinct of the child. What is the parent's role is extremely important, right? We think, oh, child is a sayyid, means we don't have to do anything. Actually, those are probably the most important years. So your job is to build a relationship of trust with the child. How do you do that? You simply respond to the needs of the child. That is your only job. If a child cries, you comfort it. If the child is hungry, you feed it. If the child wants to sleep, you make it sleep. Now, it sounds really simple, right? However, while we are doing this, what is happening underneath our awareness is that the child is building up a blueprint for their life in those 7 years. And in the first 2 years, it's extremely, important, and then it goes on, right? So what you are doing is, because the child does not have access to God, right? A Rabb is who? Let's pause for a moment. A Rabb is an entity who brings another entity to perfection step by step. That is a Rabb. Brings someone to perfection step by step. In other words, gives them everything they need to actualize their potential. Now, when you are doing this, the child doesn't know God. What he knows is you as his Rabb. So the way you deal with the child is developing an idea of the world depending on how you are dealing with it. So if you are responding to the child, if you are building connection with the child thinks that the world is a kind place. I can trust human beings. Why? Because when I cry, I am comforted. When I ask for attention, I get that attention. An extremely important period of life, okay? And of course, I won't even go without saying that modern technology has made this very difficult. It has made it very difficult for the mother to pay attention to the child because there are too many things distracting the mother, most of all, the cell phone, okay? Anyway, so you build a relationship of trust. The child, their brain, by the way, develops according to how the caregiver is responding. That's attachment theory. So if you give a child everything they need, like food, clothing, shelter, but they do not get this love and attention, they will not thrive. Their brain will not develop properly, and in many cases, they will fall sick and die. It's pretty serious. Like the first 7 years are crucial. Okay. Then what is your job as the next 7 years as a parent? Your job is to train the child. It is to train them in life skills, right? It is to give them what they need in order to succeed in this world. Okay. The second 7 to 14 done. What is the third stage of parenting? What is your role in the from the time they are 14 to the time they're 21? Your job is to act as a consultant because now they are your wazir. We've all heard that, right? So what does a wazir mean? A wazir means someone, I've taught them something, they take my flag, they take my principles, and they go live them in the world. They represent me, okay? So your job is to be a consultant. It is to say, you know what, you did that right. No, really, you need to work on that better, right? So think of it as a coach. When your children have sports coaches, what do the sports coaches do? They give them a lot of feedback, but they do it in a positive, encouraging way. So that's your job, the next seven years. Now the child has come to the age of 21. Your job is done. Your job is done. At the age of 21, your contract, so what the hadith goes on to say is that if you have done your best in those 21 years, you have discharged your duty to God. Now, the rest of their life, it is their journey. The rest of their life is their journey. What does that mean? It means if you continue to overfunction, if you continue to be involved in their lives beyond a relationship of adult human beings, that is not ihsan. That is actually disabling your child. Does this make any sense? Any of us continue to overfunction after 21? Okay. So let's know this, right? Let's recognize we are not doing our children favors. And as we go on, we'll see how this actually is causing them to have problems in their life. Because honestly, like you guys know, right, that I deal with family issues. I deal with issues with couples. And not only so, if I'm ever giving an example, please know it's not from like this community. I work with people all over the world, and I supervise other people who work all over the world. So please don't try to guess who it is, okay? That's not the point of this conversation. So that is your job, okay? Now, once your job finishes, like in the sense, the process of letting go is probably the hardest job as a parent, isn't it? When they're in our control, when we're still active parenting, then, we know, okay, we need to do this, we need to do this. So for 21 years, they have been the focus of our lives. They have been the most important thing in our lives, whether or not we're working, right? I'm not only talking to women who are not working. They have been the focus. Now is the time that we need to get some other focus for ourselves. If they continue to be the focus in our lives after the age of 21, we are going to be in trouble ourselves, and they are definitely going to be in trouble. Why? because then everything that they do when they bring a spouse home, it becomes about me. When they are trying to establish their own life, it becomes about me. When they're trying to leave home and make their own lives, I can't cope, right? Many times parents say, oh, my child cannot go away to university. Why? Why? We sometimes say it's because, they're not ready. Really, are they not ready, or are you not ready, right? So if, truly, if we're doing it for them, then we need to begin the process of letting go. What are your continuing responsibilities after the age of 21? So when you're dealing with adults, they are still part of the regular relationships that you have with other people. What are some of the principles of that? You still need to be respectful, right? You still need to show the best of akhlaq. You still need to repel evil with good. You still need to advise, but with how you would advise another adult, not in the way that you have been advising children before that, right? So again, I truly believe this, that when we become parents, it is a divine invitation. It is an invitation from God to begin our own journey of self-growth. 100%. If we don't do that journey of self-growth, it is going to impact our children and our families. Okay. So now let's come back to what is his, what's his job. So because you have such a worthy status, because you have done such an amazing job, you followed exactly the things that you were given, right? He has given you a very, very high status. So what does he say? And now I'm going to be just referring to verses of the Quran, which every parents, by the way, if they don't know anything about the Quran, they know that children are supposed to deal with them with ihsan. True? If there's one verse of the Quran, we know it's that. Okay? So let's remind children. Let's remind children what are some of the status that Allah has given us as parents. Okay. So what are children supposed to do? Surah Baqarah, they're supposed to spend first on parents. Okay. Secondly, they don't do shirk and they do ihsan. It is joint. Their relationship to God, the next person, the next entity which is worthy of their most important relationship in this planet, in their existence, is the parents. They're supposed to pray for them. They're supposed to serve him, do ihsan to the parents again and again and again. When the parents become older, the responsibilities of the children grow much more. When the parents are, and we'll talk about this in a minute, but they're not supposed to show any sign of disdain or frustration to the parents, to the extent you can't even say oof. Okay, that's what the Quran says. You are supposed to, so the general commandment in the Quran related to ihsan is what? To speak to everyone with ihsan. Qawlan husna, right? However, with parents, the responsibility becomes even more. You're supposed to speak to them qawlan kareem. Kareem means, in addition to ihsan, it has an added thing of being generous, of being more than what you need to do. You're supposed to show compassion to them. You're supposed to show humility to them. You lower your wing in humility. You, again, pray for them. Why? Because they showed you their Rabbaniyat when you were young. They did the first ihsan, and we've talked about how when a person does the first ihsan, it's almost impossible to pay them back. Why? Because they didn't owe you. They didn't have an obligation and they did something. Now you have to pay it back, right? So what else? You have to be grateful to God and to both your parents. You have to be, again, do ihsan on them. Again, you have to pray for them. So this is the status of you, of parents, and these are the obligations at the same time that Allah has put on children. Now, what does Hadith say? Hadith says that if you as a mother die while you are serving your family, you die the death of a shaheed. So you have the same status as somebody who has lost their lives in the cause of Allah, right? And we know that. We know that when that's a completely different status, okay, firstly. Secondly, you have Jannah under your feet. Who hasn't heard of this? Anyone? Anyone heard the fact that Jannah is under the feet of the mother? Have we ever reflected on what this means? Have we ever? Do we have any idea of what this means? If my status is such that Jannah is under my feet, that's really, because let's say the last 2-3 days, that's all I've been thinking about. Am I worthy of this? Am I the kind of mother that when I walk, if my children walk in my footsteps, I am going to deliver them to the door of Jannah? If my children walk in my footsteps, I am going to deliver them to the door of Jannah. How am I doing that? Firstly, and yesterday we didn't get a chance, but there's this beautiful long thing about false worship. What is false worship? Many, many things. What is true worship? Dealing with ihsan with people. So if I have dealt with ihsan with my children, which means I have dealt with kindness, with rabbaniyat, with compassion, with mercy, with generosity, in my own relationships, the way I deal with other human beings, that's the blueprint that my child is getting. Please, let's not make any mistakes about this. The way you deal in your relationships, firstly with your spouse, with your in-laws, with your extended family, with your siblings, that's the blueprint that they are inheriting for their relationship. So if we wonder why our children are having trouble forming relationships, we really need to look at ourselves. Okay? So how am I, how am I delivering them to Jannah? And we need to also recognize after the age of 21 that no matter what, who has the emotional power in this relationship? Who has the emotional power? Parents, 100%. Regardless of where you are, till you are alive on this planet, your approval means a lot to your children. It does not matter how they are acting. Your love and your approval means the world to your children. If they have to fight for that, if they have to compete for that, if it is withdrawn because they didn't do what you wanted them to do, they are going to be messed up. And at that point, we have to ask ourselves, Jannah has been placed under my feet. Am I making this life hell for my children? One thing I ask myself regularly, am I a blessing or a trial? Am I a blessing to my close relationships or am I a trial? If I am such that I withhold my affection, if they do something, I become silent, not that I've never done it, please, okay? If I put one child against the other, if they want to go somewhere, I use emotional blackmail, emotional manipulation, am I worthy of the Jannah that's under my feet? Okay. I did say it was going to be a hard lecture. Okay. So, Allah has also, in all His mercy and blessing, given us a very, very simple formula in the Quran for good relationships. And this, it comes, if you put it in context, when was this verse revealed, which I'm about to tell you about? It is in Surah Al Imran, it is verse 159. It is when in the Battle of Uhud, the Prophet ﷺ, when all his companions, they sort of messed up, right? They didn't do what they were supposed to. They actually disobeyed him. And that disobedience cost a lot. We know sort of, right, a little bit of the history of Uhud. It was from a victory it turned into a defeat for the Muslims. So it's not like it was a little thing. It was a big thing. Okay, so now again, how does this apply in our families? When our children make mistakes, when they do something which we don't like, what is Allah telling the Prophet? Thus, it is due to the mercy from Allah that you deal with them gently. Linta lahum. Linta layyan means very soft, very kind, very forgiving. Not being nitpicky about you did this wrong, you did this wrong, right? Not critical. And had you been rough, hard-hearted, they would certainly have dispersed from around you. Pardon them, therefore, and ask pardon for them, and take counsel with them in the affair, so that when you have decided, then place your trust in Allah. This, if only, honestly, one verse enough for a family relationship. So let's look what it says. When people make mistakes, and they will, our children are not perfect, are we perfect? What kind of standard are we holding them up for, right? And again, I'm really talking to myself. So if we deal with them harshly, it will be a challenge for them. It will be a trial. Their relationship with me is going to be a trial. Now, are they still going to try? Yes, they will. Why? Because Allah has created this idea of that they need to do well by their parents, and they have a lot of spiritual baggage. And at that point, it becomes a baggage, right? It becomes a baggage. Why? Because Allah is telling them, do ihsan, do ihsan, do ihsan to the parents. When the parent is so rejecting, when the parent is using all sorts of emotional manipulation and all sorts of negativity on the child, it becomes, they can't focus on anything else. It's impacting their marriages. It's impacting their relationship with their own children, right? So, how do you deal with them? Pardon them, overlook. People are human beings. They will continue to make mistakes, and ask pardon for them. So ask Allah to forgive them, ask Allah to guide them. And then, it says, take counsel from them. Talk to them. Like, find out what is bothering them. If they're not praying, if they're not fasting, if they always seem to be in a bad mood, what is it? What is it that is making them go down that path? Okay? And these are the ways that really, as parents, we can maintain. And I keep saying this every single time, right? Our leverage, so we think we have control over our children, right? And we may have control over them till they are in their whatever, very young. At least I lost control of my kids very young, okay? So the only leverage that we have with them, the only influence we have over them is our relationship with them. So if that relationship is good and strong and nurturing, two ways, not that, okay, this is what you owe me, you do ihsan to me, I will misbehave, I will emotionally blackmail you, and I'm not speaking to anyone here, you know that, right? I mean, because I deal with these things, and obviously there are many, many healthy, happy families, the ones who show up in the offices who are not so healthy and happy, right? So if again, why are we talking about it here when it probably nobody here needs it, is because you probably know someone who does. And it's a good idea to counsel them like this, right? That build relationship. Don't be so nitpicky. Let it go. If you talk to your children, if you repel evil with kindness, they will come back. There's this. How are we doing for time? Because clearly I could talk about this till next week. Can we have a salawat? There's this, just to lighten it up. There's a beautiful story of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So, there was a companion who was in need. We don't really know too many details, but he was in need, so the Prophet gave him something. But he was a bit cross and crotchety, and he still was like, showing displeasure. So the Prophet said, have I done good to you? And he said, no, never. You have never done good to me. Okay. So, of course, the Prophet ﷺ was surrounded by his companions who all got really upset, and they were ready to kill him. Okay. So the Prophet said, just calm down. Calm down. Imagine that it was your naqa. Your naqa is who? Your little baby camel. So if your baby camel strays, do you know how to bring it back? So everyone was silent, right? So he said, I know how to bring the baby camel back. So he deals with the Sahabi, and he gives him more. He keeps giving him more and more, right? And he keeps asking him, "Are you happy now? Are you happy now?" And finally, the ashab says that yes, now I'm happy. You have done good to me. Okay. So this happens over a couple of days. So now, the Prophet ﷺ goes to that. Now look at the rahmah of this Prophet of ours. He goes to that person and he says, the way you behaved that day, I'm fine with it. Like, I know you were going through a hard time, but my companions, they're a bit upset with you because of what you did. So why not come and tell everyone that we're good now? That we're okay, that you're happy with me, because it will improve your standing. It will improve your standing with my companions. So he comes and he shows everyone that, yes, I'm happy with the Prophet, we are good. And that the Prophet ﷺ turns around and tells him, yesterday, if I had let you do, you would have killed this man. And because you would have killed him, he would have gone to hell. Why? Because he was disrespectful to me, right? So he would have gone to hell. And you would have gone to hell too, because you did something without my permission. But because we were patient, because we actually communicated with him, because now all of us are good. That's like, I literally remind myself of that story probably every week. That the way to deal with human beings who are upset, including our children, including our adult children, including our parents, is to show kindness. And why am I talking to? I'm going to come to the children, promise, okay? So beautiful, right? That, like, let's talk about it, and don't even, like, instead of even telling them off, let's get everyone to respect each other. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. So now, children. What is our responsibility as children? And now I'm going to be speaking to children and myself as a child. As our parents age, our responsibilities become higher and higher. Is this easy? We tell ourselves, and by the way, in the modern world, the way the modern society is geared, this is becoming very challenging. Why? Because in the old days, age meant wisdom. Age meant you had lived life. Age meant you had experience. Age meant you had to share something of value with someone else. That whole idea in most societies, I'm not talking about the Muslim communities, in most of the world has changed. Why? Because now children can Google, right? They don't need to ask parents anything. In the old days, I remember when I needed a recipe, who would I call? I would call my mother, I would call my nani, I would call my khala, right? Nowadays, thank God, they still ask me sometimes. But most of the time, if they want to cook something, what do? They go on YouTube, right? So as a result of which, generations have become very split. And, this is again a very huge topic, but to just go very, very quickly, when we as children are coming into our blossom, when we are becoming stronger, that's the same time that our parents are declining. And it's hard. It is very hard, especially in this day and age where age is not something which is respected. Okay. So slowly what's happening is that they are losing things that they were able to do, right? And at that point, we really have to remember the Quranic words that, we don't say off to them, because the worst thing you can tell an elderly person is, why can't you do this? You were able to do this. What's wrong with you? Why have you forgotten? I told you this 100 times. We need to remind ourselves that when we were learning how to speak, how many times did they tell us the same thing, right? What are some of the needs of the older people? Yes, the main thing is, as much as they can, as long as they can, for them to be independent. That is their need. Sometimes children, I know, what have I done? For a month, all I did was call my parents and tell them off. One whole month. Why? Because they were not doing things according to my thing for the pandemic. They were not being careful enough, right? That's being controlling. That's not being respectful, right? So at some point I had to realize that my job is, yes, I am worried about them, I'm extremely worried about them, and my role is to support them in living life according to, you know, what they want to do, right? And they're probably listening, by the way, so I'm going to get called out on all of this. So then what happens is that, but here's the thing, we need to be very, very clear that a healthy multi-generational relationship is good for all generations. And this I'm speaking to young mothers in particular. When we have problems with our in-laws, when we have problems with an extended family, the first thing we do, mother is the gateway to the children. True? What do? They withhold the children from the grandparents. So they will make it harder for grandparents to see their grandchildren. Please know that you are doing your own children disservice, because a strong relationship with grandparents is one of the strongest, most beautiful legacies that you can give your child. I know that my relationship with my Nani, and like nothing can replace that. Whenever I would fight with my mother, I would carry my little shoes and I would walk out of the house saying, I'm going to, and my son did the same to me, right? So it gives them security, it gives them a sense of purpose, it gives them, where they come from. It's like really good for kids. When we let our own conflict come in that way, we are not doing them a favor. We are really, messing them up. For adults, obviously, for elderly people, they, there was in like a few years ago, the thought was that elderly people are a drain on resources, astaghfirullah, right? Because they are no longer, this is a capitalist society, they're no longer contributing, they're only consuming resources. Now it turns out, when they found out that it's actually really harmful to split the family, what they are finding out that a close relationship with all the generations, with parents, grandparents, and children, is one of the best things you can do for all generations. Children benefit, elderly benefit, because they have a feeling of purpose, they have a feeling of being needed, they have a feeling of contribution, legacy, and they have a lot to offer because they have lived more, they have more wisdom, right? For adults, obviously, it's a huge help to be on good terms with your parents and your in-laws. Why? Because parenting is a hard job. It really is a hard job, and if you have support to do it, it makes it much easier. By the way, for a child to have between 4 to 6 caring adults in their lives gives them the best start. 4 to 6. 6 means 2 parents, 2 sets of grandparents, right? So, and of course, if you don't have grandparents, siblings and khalas and mamus and chachas, all of them, right? But, so that's the idea. So to at least recognize that when I make an effort to build relationships between the generations, it's extremely positive, okay? So this, and by the way, so now when spouses come into the picture, okay, that's when sometimes things go badly wrong. Because how I've grown up in my family, or say, let me talk about my own nuclear family, okay? So however dysfunctional or functional my family is we're used to it. Like if mother's always in a bad mood, if father's got an anger problem, if, the sisters are throwing tantrums, we're used to it, we think this is normal. Now somebody else comes into the house, okay? Somebody else comes into the house and they're like, what did I do, right? Where have I landed, okay? So obviously there's going to be some adjustment. Now, the worst way to deal with this is that, like I said, if I have not started letting go at the age of 21 as a mother, and I'm talking to desi mothers or boys right now, please let's not make any thing. I am the desi mother of a boy, okay? I am talking to, we seem to be some strange breed that has a reaction when our boys get married. I don't know what happens. But at that point, suddenly I want to hold on. Suddenly I want to be involved. Suddenly the daughter-in-law, who is going through a form of a culture shock, because she's the one who's come into this family with its own principles, traditions, everything, is trying to adjust, is wanting to make a relationship with the mother-in-law, But mother-in-law is making it slightly hard. And I know we think that, these days all the power is in the daughter-in-laws. That is not true. Because what I see in my offices with people I consult with, that grown men, because think of your son, okay? Forget anyone else. Think of your son who you love very, very much. When his mother and his sister are not getting along, his mother and his wife are not getting along, he is between a rock and a hard place. There is no way this man can make it. There is no way he can make two of the most important women in his life happy at the same time. Now, can you imagine what pressure it is putting on that guy? Please make no mistake. It's putting pressure on him. His work is suffering. His relationships are suffering. His parenting is suffering, right? It is what it is. So, what can we do? First of all, the 4 keys to having strong intergenerational relationships. First thing is respect. If somebody doesn't see things your way, it doesn't mean they're wrong. It just means they have a different way. Every family, two sisters, do all your siblings have the same values, same families? No, right? Everyone has their own way of looking at things. Reciprocity. If I'm expecting so much from my children, I need to at least give them love, na? I need to make it pleasant. If I'm expecting that they come for lunch every single week, they spend 3 days a week with me or 3 evenings a week, they will do that because I have that emotional power in that relationship. But if I make it pleasant for them, they will do it happily. They will still do it, right? But their Jannah will be a bit messed up, don't you think? Because now they have resentment, anger. Because what they're saying is that, this person is supposed to reflect God in my life. And God is not unjust. So it is very confusing for a child when a parent is emotionally abusive. Extremely thing. Resilience. So coming back to the fact that, yes, this is, I'm talking about very hard situations. Not every situation is so hard. Generally, we just rub off on each other, right? Like mother-in-law has her own way of doing things. Daughter-in-law has her own way of doing things. Reciprocity, right? Talk about it. Communication. Extremely important. This is when you just don't say, okay, good intention, and you move on. If something is bothering you, you talk about it, okay? And then, what can we do? So this is obviously now, we do need to talk about the fact that what if, and because obviously I deal with the most crisis of situations where children, are trying their best. Their best means imperfect best. It's not like they're doing nothing wrong, but they're trying. But the mother, like if they've left the house, if they bought their own house, which they're allowed to Islamically, right? The Islamic recommendation is you live close but not together. Why? Because Allah has a bit of wisdom, right? He knows what He's recommending. So when they try to do that, there are cases where mother has not spoken to the children for a year. Why? Because they left home. Now the children keep going. They go to the thing. They go on Eid, and this is the difference between working with a Muslim therapist as opposed to, because if you go to a Main Street person, they'll say toxic relationship, cut. In our faith, that is not an option. It's not an option to cut ties. And so my message to those people is who are struggling in this way is don't give up. Remember, God's job to guide them, your job to live with Ihsan, and their job, inshallah, to come around at some point. Okay, so did I really go over? So, inshallah, that is the message for today. Very fast, and thank you. I know these words were not hard to hear. They were not hard for me to do either, because when I look at myself in the mirror, I know there's a lot of work to be done. So inshallah, we will all take it with the right intention. And I did not do my thank yous, which are very, very important. First of all, obviously to our host, Nuzarapa, who always does these things with amazing enthusiasm. And her enthusiasm and passion for remembering the Ahlul Bayt is truly inspirational, right? I had a lot of support this year, so I reached out. I asked for people to help me research Quranic verses and all. And Mehreen, Rahim, and Zara Rizvi, who, Valji, sorry, Zara Valji, who I've never even met. So a lot of people, came forward, and those are the two, and they have gone above and beyond. So really, thank you to them. I cannot ever repay it. Made my life so much easier. Of course, the volunteers who, as usual, just go above and beyond their thing. All of you, people who've reached out online, it's really very, very heartwarming. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. And again, please, I'm always talking to myself. My friends told me, so yesterday we heard you called us out by calling us the chatty group, and it's not that, right? It's we all learn from each other, and we're creating a support of community that will help us move towards Allah together. So